Alright, y'all. Welcome to a discussion on correlation and regression. So I'm going to run you through conducting a correlation analysis, a Pearson correlation, and a regression analysis within Excel. And I'll run you through each component of the correlation and the regression. So let's start off here and let me kind of describe this data real quick. Let me go to the data tab. So my class collected Airbnb data from about 320 different Airbnb hosts. I had to do a bit of data cleaning here, so we actually have several cases that are missing, and that's because we just didn't have things like star ratings or something like that. So I did what we call a list-wise deletion. I just removed any case that had any missingness across any of the variables. So if we take a look at our data here, we have nice clean data. Everything's nice and clean for us to analyze. Excel is particularly picky when it comes to things like data cleaning for some strange reason. I don't know why. It really is, and it's a bit obnoxious, but that's Excel for you. So we have full complete data here, and that's what we'll be using. So let's take a look at a research question here. So let's say I'm interested in the research question, is there a relationship between a host's price per night and their average number of stars across I think there's about 6 ratings for stars. And remember, for regression and correlation, we have a couple of assumptions that we need to meet. And one of those main assumptions is that the variables are measured at the interval ratio level, right? And although the average number of stars, you might think, well, that's ordinal, that's not necessarily interval ratio. This can kind of extend to ordinal level variables as well. Considering this is an average, it creates sort of a continuous type of variable. So let's take a look at our data here. So we'll run a couple of analyses. So the first analysis we'll run, we have a bunch of data here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the number of days as an Airbnb host. And I want to, I don't know why this is not working for me, but I'm going to run a correlation matrix, what we call a correlation matrix, for a whole list of variables here. All right, so go to our data analysis little function here, and I'm actually going to go to correlation. Some of this might be filled in already because I was playing with it a bit earlier. So if I delete this, and let's start here, we actually can grab all of these variables. I'm going to stop at this last one, value, and I'm going to select this entire array of data. Make that go a little faster. Okay, so I'm selecting the entire array of data. There we go. We do have labels in the first row, and we'll do a new worksheet, and we'll call this correlation matrix. Alright, click OK here. And so in this correlation matrix, we have a whole bunch of, as you can see, a whole bunch of data here. And what we're looking for is we're looking for the relationships between these variables. And so if we go back to the research question, is there a relationship between a host's price per night and average stars? And we go to our correlation matrix, we're going to look at the intersection of those two variables, right? So we're going to look at price per night. Actually, we'll look at price per night this way, and average star rating this way, right? And here we can see our relationship here. So I will highlight this yellow. So as we can see, we have a negative relationship. So what that's telling us is that as the price per night increases, we actually see a decrease in the average star rating. I don't know why. I can't really hypothesize why, but that's the case. So unfortunately, Excel doesn't give us our p-values or our p-values, which is it indicates whether or not this is a statistical significant relationship or not. But fortunately, what regression does is it gives us that information. So again, the two variables we want is price of the space per night and average rating of stars, right? Yes, okay, price per night and average rating of stars. So let's go back to our data. Let's go to our data view here and data analysis. I'm going to run a regression now. So our correlation told us that there was a negative relationship. It's a fairly small relationship because it's at the 0.06 level. But let's see if there's any significant relationship here. So let's click on a regression thing here under our data analysis tab. Click OK. And I'm going to click off all of these. I don't want confidence levels. I just want the labels. New worksheet, we'll call this regression, and then let's pick our data here. So we want so as you see here, there's y and x. Our y variable is our dependent variable, and our x variable is our independent variable. So because I'm asking the question, is there a relationship between the host price per night and average number of stars, our number of stars is going to be the dependent variable. So that'll be our y variable. So let's look at average star rating. Make sure I got all those. And then we want to get our x, which is price per night. Get all of those. We do have labels in the top, so let's keep those. And we can go ahead and click OK. And I'm going to actually remove this little data thing here. Okay, so let's go through and let's talk about every little component here in this output. So this gives us our overall output for our regression model. If we look at this r squared, so here's some of the things that we need to look at. This r squared tells us what we call the percentage of variance accounted for in our regression model. And so this is the overall model. You can do the same thing with multiple regression, meaning having multiple independent variables, predicting a single dependent variable. So this r squared, think of it as a percentage, right? So right now it's in proportion format, but if we turned it into a percentage, that would tell us our percentage of variance accounted for. So it's less than 1%. It's very small. So what this is telling us is that our outcome variable of average number of stars, less than 1% of that outcome variable is accounted for by our price, right? Yeah, by our host price per night. So it's very small. So it's likely not significant. So this ANOVA table here, this actually tells us whether or not our model is significant. So we have different components here. We have our degrees of freedom, the regression degrees of freedom versus residual degrees of freedom, sums of squares, etc., etc. We don't really need all of that information. The one main thing we're going to be looking for is the significance f. And the significance f is telling us whether or not our model is statistically significant from 0. So it's comparing 0 to what our model is created. And as you can see here, it's not significant. This is greater than 0.05. And that's what we're looking for is the number of less than 0.05. So if it's greater than 0.05, then it's not significant. So what this is telling us is that our single variable that we entered into the model is not significant. But let's take a look at that variable specifically and see what the variable says. So this ANOVA table is for the entire model. This table here at the bottom is specifically for the variable. All right. So let's take a look at our price per night. We want to ignore this intercept. It has meaning, but it's not relevant for us at this point. So let's just look at this price per night. So this coefficient, what this is telling us is that for every 0.005, or excuse me, for every one a 1 increase, there's a 0.005 decrease in number of stars, right? So let's put this another way. So for every dollar in this, so let's go through each of these. So this coefficient, what this is telling us is that for every dollar increase in a host's price per night, we see a 0.005 decrease in their average stars their average number of stars, right? So as price goes up, we actually see a decrease in stars. However, the question here is that relationship statistically significant? And so to identify that, we're going to look at these two values here that I just highlighted, and more specifically this p-value. So like every other test, every other statistical test, we're looking for this value to be less than 0.05. As we can see here, it is not. It's 0.267, and if you've noticed, that matches exactly this 0.267 up here in the model, and that's because it's the only variable in the model. So it is the only predictor of this entire model. So this 0.267 is saying that our relationship here between price per night and our outcome variable of number of stars is not statistically significantly different. So if we go back to our research question, is there a relationship between a host's price per night and average stars? What we can say by looking at this is no, and that's because this p-value is greater than 0.05. So I hope you understand a bit here about reading both the correlation table, which we have here, and our regression table. You can mess around with different types of variables and just kind of play around with it. And remember that the main assumption that we need to make here is that our variables are really continuous in some way, right? So interval ratio, yes, but at the end of the day, they need to be continuous. All right, I hope this was helpful, and I will talk with you later. No, it's not bad.